There was a woman in my kayak. That might have been fine if she weren't wearing a wine-stained bathrobe, holding a half-eaten cheese board, and screaming about maritime rights while clumsily paddling away from my dock with my German Shepherd, Duke, still sitting on the edge looking as stunned as I was. I hadn't even turned off my truck yet. At first glance, it might have looked like a bizarre lakeside prank. But this wasn't some neighborhood prank war. No, this was the beginning of a full-blown suburban meltdown starring Marlene, the newly elected HOA president. And it all started the moment she decided my dock-me private, federally leased dock should belong to the entire community. Let me back up. This dock wasn't just some wobbly platform nailed together by a weekend warrior with a hammer and a dream. It was the lifeline to my coastal property. I bought the land long before the HOA ever existed. Over the years, while most folks argued about which brand of lawn fertilizer to use or who left their garbage cans out too long, I kept my dock pristine and leased it to the U.S. Coast Guard. They used it for emergency drills, high-speed maneuvers, and occasional fuel stops. The agreement was ironclad, federally documented, and not subject to HOA interference. At least, that's what I believed. Then came Marlene. She moved into the neighborhood about 2 months ago, freshly divorced, accompanied by a yappy terrier named Figaro, and a voice sharp enough to chip paint. She carried a laminated HOA rulebook like it was the Bible and walked around as if she'd been personally chosen by destiny to whip our peaceful neighborhood into shape. Her first HOA meeting included a PowerPoint titled, "How to Improve Our Community by Eliminating Individualism." No one clapped. Still, she somehow became president. Probably because no one else wanted the jobber, because she quietly threatened to revoke pool access from anyone who didn't vote for her. Whatever the reason, she took her role very seriously. It started with a glitter-covered handwritten note taped to my mailbox. "Dear homeowner," it read in curly letters. "The HOA has noticed your dock appears to be underutilized and inaccessible to the community. We'd love to schedule a discussion about making it available for neighborhood use. Let's work together to make the coast a shared space." I blinked, then blinked again, then laughed. I figured it was just some misguided overreach. So I responded with a typed letter including a copy of my lease agreement with the Coast Guard, city zoning approval, and my deed, which very clearly stated that the dock belonged to me and was exempt from community governance. I even highlighted the part that read, "This structure is not subject to future HOA jurisdiction." Her reply? A glittery post-it with 2 words, "We'll see." I didn't think much of it until I came home from a weekend trip and found the aftermath of a backyard wine rave scattered across my dock. There were plastic wine cups, a cooler full of half-melted cheese, someone's forgotten sandals draped over my boat, and a yoga mat tangled around my anchor rope like a drunken sea serpent. Duke sat beside the chaos with a look that said, "I tried to stop them." Apparently, while I was gone, Marlene hosted a dockside detox for her 10 closest friends. She claimed the dock was common access and had temporarily liberated it from private misuse. She even hung a sign that said, in dollar store lettering, "Community Dock Namaste and Rose." It would have been funny if it weren't real. I called her that evening, calm but firm, and reminded her that the dock was under federal lease. I told her the Coast Guard would be conducting drills the next day and that any further trespassing could be considered interference with government operations. I asked her, nicely, to keep off the property. She chuckled and said, "Oh, you mean those guys in the cosplay uniforms? I thought they were playing paintball." The next morning, I went down to prep the dock for the incoming patrol boat and found a new insult. Lawn chairs, clearly used, had been placed around the fuel storage drum, which she had helpfully moved out of the way. That wasn't just entitled. That was dangerous. One spark, and Marlene would have made history as the first HOA president to start a dock fire with Chardonnay and entitlement. I called my contact with the Coast Guard officer Lena Ramirez. She didn't even hesitate. "Send me the footage," she said. "If she interferes again, we'll handle it." Luckily, I had cameras installed all around the property, mostly to keep an eye on raccoons and curious tourists. But now, they were catching gold. I sent the video of the wine party, the furniture staging, and Marlene dragging patio chairs across my boat like she was prepping for a photo shoot in Coastal Living, Dictator's Edition. Later that day, I stood on my porch with a mug of coffee as a Coast Guard boat pulled up. 3 officers in uniform stepped onto the dock, efficient, professional, and unmistakably federal. Marlene arrived moments later, armed with a clipboard and the unshakable confidence of someone who thinks being the loudest means being the smartest. She demanded to see community docking permissions, whatever that meant. When Officer Ramirez explained who they were and why they were there, Marlene huffed and said, "You people can't just claim a dock like pirates." Officer Ramirez blinked. "Ma'am, do you understand what federal jurisdiction means?" Marlene scoffed. "I'll have to check with the board." Then God help Mesh tried to stand in front of the patrol boat to block it from leaving. It was the most surreal thing I'd ever seen. And I've lived through 2 hurricanes. The officers gave her one final warning. She left, muttering about citizens' arrests and a dock revolution. That night, a newsletter appeared in every mailbox, "A dock divided cannot float." It accused me of using military threats to suppress community engagement and announced a petition to reclaim the dock for public use. Attached, a photo of Marlene waving from my kayak captioned, "Marlene reclaiming the waters for the people." I was speechless. Duke stared at the flyer like he wanted to eat it. And then came the email. Subject: dock fine notification. Apparently, because I was denying fair access to a shared water amenity, I owed $500 a day in community fees retroactive to the date of the petition. I laughed so hard I dropped my sandwich into the marina. I forwarded the email and petition complete with glitter stickers and peace signs to Officer Ramirez. She responded, "Documenting. Let me know if she escalates." Spoiler, she did. Next, Marlene camped out at the end of my driveway wearing a neon vest and holding a handmade sign that read, "Community Patrol." She waved at joggers, glared at my security cameras, and warned passing dog walkers not to approach restricted federal zones. I couldn't tell if she was mocking the Coast Guard or genuinely believed she'd become a nautical sheriff. Then came the refueling drill. The Coast Guard returned 3 officers, a cutter, and a checklist. But this time, Marlene marched down in a tennis outfit with a lanyard that looked suspiciously like a library card, demanding they register as guests and promise not to perform intimidating military acts. Officer Ramirez responded, "Ma'am, federal jurisdiction cannot be overridden by HOA preferences." Marlene filmed them. She uploaded the video with a caption, "Unauthorized military intimidation in residential waters." Comments ranged from "she's nuts" to "was she drunk again?" Officer Ramirez called that evening. She interfered with operations again. "We're escalating." Then came the emergency HOA meeting. Held off course seat the community pool. Because water is the issue and the answer. Marlene had printed out a map of the neighborhood, circled my dock in red, and titled her presentation, "Dock Equity: A Vision for Shared Spaces." She even quoted Thoreau. One board member reportedly Googled, "Can you be sued by the U.S. military?" during her speech. The next morning, I opened the door to find a man in aviators and a Hawaiian shirt. "Name's Hank," he said. "Retired Coast Guard commander. Moved here last year. I'm on your side." He'd already had his own run-in with Marlenesh, told him his American flag was too aggressive. He laughed in her face and kept it flying. "She needs pressure from the top," Hank said. "Let's coordinate." And boy, did we. But you'll want to hear what happened at Dock Day. And the drone, and the fake lawsuit, and how Homeland Security got involved. The story continues exactly as requested, flowing into the complete narrative. Due to response length limits, I will continue in the next message. Continuing the full story seamlessly. By the following Saturday, Marlene had plastered the neighborhood with flyers for what she dubbed Dynamic Dock Day, complete with balloons, a DJ lineup, a wine list, and a schedule of events all happening on my federally leased dock. She was completely undeterred by the cease and desist. I showed the flyer to Hank. He snorted. "Perfect. Let her throw her party. We'll bring some guests." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of guests?" "The kind with uniforms and boats," he grinned. I cleared my schedule. When Saturday arrived, it looked like Marlene had planned a suburban Coachella. Coolers, tables, streamers. She even wore a sash that read Dock Queen and passed out paper wristbands like it was some exclusive waterfront gala. I waited inside until I heard the hum of diesel engines. 3 Coast Guard vessels appeared, gliding in perfect formation. One docked. Boots hit the boards. Marlene ran forward, shouting, "You're not on the guest list." The lead officer stared down at her. "We're not guests, ma'am. We're the reason this dock exists." A second crew fired up the water cannon for a demonstration, sending a towering mist over the wine tables. Glasses toppled. The DJ's gear shorted out with a dramatic pop. Guests screamed and scattered. Chardonnay dripped from soaked tablecloths like wet dreams deflating. Marlene stood frozen, her sash flapping in the wind, her mascara smeared like war paint. I leaned on the deck railing, sipping coffee. Duke sat beside me, tongue out, tail wagging. It was over. The message had been delivered. But she wasn't done yet. The very next morning, Marlene returned to the HOA message board. She accused the Coast Guard of terrorizing a peaceful gathering and claimed propulsion trauma from the boat engines had disrupted the energy fields of several attendees. She demanded an emergency vote to reassign the dock to the HOA for responsible stewardship. This time, the board didn't play along. One board member, Marcia, called me personally. We had a closed-door meeting. After watching the footage of her waving a baguette at a federal officer, we're done. They passed a quiet resolution. No HOA policies would ever apply to my dock. They also stripped Marlene of all leadership roles, citing behavior detrimental to community harmony and national security interests. It was exile by bureaucratic sword. Things went quiet. Neighbors began waving again. Someone brought over cookies. One joked, "Didn't know you were running a military base back here." I just smiled. Even Duke seemed relaxed. Then came the drone. It buzzed past my window one morning, hovering over the dock like a mechanical hummingbird. I traced the signal and spotted Marlene in her backyard wearing a wide-brimmed hat and holding a remote like she was orchestrating an airstrike. The next day, I received a letter. Not from her. From her nephew. Yes, the same nephew who had just passed the bar and was now cosplaying as a constitutional lawyer. The letterhead looked like a word template with a misspelled motto. Justice where you dock it. It accused me of harboring militarized personnel in a residential zone and warned of potential legal action. I forwarded it to Officer Ramirez. Her reply, received. Frivolous. No reply warranted. But I kept the letter. My collection was growing between the cease and desist, the flyers, and the pirate drawing of me from the neighborhood kids. I was considering a dockside museum. Then came the final straw. I woke up to find orange surveyor flags planted all around my property. Spray-painted arrows pointed toward the dock. Plastic stakes read, "Potential Development Zone." Confused, I followed the markers to the water. Taped to the railing was a laminated document, Preliminary Expansion Plan HOA Kayak Club, complete with hand-drawn diagrams, a juice bar, and a community reflection nook. She had sketched a koi pond. On my dock. On federal property. I took it to Hank. He didn't laugh this time. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder marked Strategic Coastal Sites, and said, "She wants to play with feds? Let's play." Turns out, Hank still had connections. One letter to an old friend in D.C., and days later, Marlene received official correspondence from the Department of Homeland Security. Not a threat and inquiry. Had the HOA knowingly interfered with federally leased land used for national emergency drills? She vanished. No flyers. No emails. Not even a passive-aggressive yoga chant. The HOA board met without her and formally voted. My dock was exempt from any HOA jurisdiction. Permanently. The quiet that followed was almost unsettling. For weeks, the dock stood serene. No sashes. No patrols. Just water, wind, and Duke snoring in the sun. Then a letter arrived. From the Regional Coast Guard Commander. A thank you note. Apparently, footage from Dock Day had made the round used in training seminars on civilian interference. As a result, my dock had been granted permanent designation as an official Coast Guard emergency training site. A bronze plaque was installed that read, "This dock supports national safety and readiness. Maintained in cooperation with the U.S. Coast Guard. Unauthorized interference is a federal offense." I took a photo, considered printing it on a t-shirt. That weekend, the local paper ran a photo of the plaque alongside a quote I'd given a reporter. I think the dock speaks for itself. But just as peace settled over the waves, whispers returned. Marlene was back this time as a community member rather than a board officer. She came to meetings clutching binders labeled New Community Visions. At first, I ignored it. Let her fight wind turbines or propose a mural on someone's fence. Until one morning, a new yoga mat appeared on my mailbox, tied with a ribbon. Attached was a flyer. Karen's Community Center Proposal, a Vision for Unity. At the bottom, in fine print, the original dock site would make a beautiful meditation platform with minor modifications. Minor modifications. That meant tearing it down and replacing it with beanbags. I called Hank. He choked on his tea. She doesn't learn, does she? We posted laminated copies of the federal lease and DHS letter at the gate. For the neighbor's benefit, not hers. But then came the final twist. Marlene's nephew filed a zoning complaint accusing me of operating a commercial enterprise by leasing my dock to the Coast Guard. It went to hearing. I arrived dressed like someone who just wanted to be left alone. Marlene sat behind her nephew, arms folded, lips tight. The zoning officer flipped through the federal documents, blinked, and said, "This is out of our jurisdiction. Case dismissed." As I left, a reporter asked if I had a comment. I nodded. I think the doc speaks for itself. The article ran the next morning. The photo? Me next to the plaque, Marlene blurry in the background looking like she just swallowed a lemon. Back home, the sun glinted off the water. Neighbors waved. Someone left a bottle of wine on my porch with a note, "Only drink it if the Coast Guard's invited." I smiled. I wasn't bitter. Just prepared. Because the thing about people like Marlene? They don't disappear. They regroup. And somewhere in the HOA bylaws, I'm sure she's flipping pages, hunting for her next battleground. But for now, Duke and I sit on the dock. Coffee in hand. Tied in our ears. Peace in our lungs. Until the next flyer arrives. Probably warning us that blue is now an aggressive color. Here we go again.